Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode here at Tribal Trades, the daily show. And today we're going to ask the question, whales are selling. Could the top be in? What might that look like? What historically has been the top for Bitcoin? What do we see in the charts? And a whole bunch more. Before we do that, smash the like button. This does help get this channel out to more people and, of course, does help support the channel. And if you're new, welcome to the channel. Smash that subscribe and bell notification and you'll get the daily updates. So first of all, I want to go to some interesting data here. We've got whales dumping at a ratio not seen since the bear market in mid-2022. Now, is this a sign of the top or that the top is in, or is this just whales taking some profit and rotating their assets into other areas of investment? Okay, but you can see that this is a large amount of selling off. This is the big news that is going around at the moment. And of course, we can't ignore that. We can't also ignore unpopular opinion that MicroStrategy price down, Bitcoin price with the two tops, one top and then the second top coming in at 65 and 69. This was back in 2021, and seeing something very similar here where the MicroStrategy top looks to be in, and of course making lower lows and Bitcoin making higher highs. So if you look at the MicroStrategy like an RSI, bearish divergence, there's your bearish divergence. And then there we go. We get a higher high with Bitcoin, but a lower high for MicroStrategy, higher high for Bitcoin 2025, lower high for MicroStrategy. We also have something looking very similar. This is the overlay of the 2025 bull market over the top of 2021. And yes, it does look fairly similar there. You've got the two tops there, one at 65 and then another at 69. And then, of course, overlaid, you've got that top that we had in December at 109, and now possibly a little bit of a higher top of around $123,000 there. Now, I want to look, I've done some research, and I put it all together in a wonderful tweet here. Go and check me out, Tribal Traders. Crypto Coins 365 is the handle there. But you can see here, I wanted to bring your attention to this here, is when historically the tops have been in. So what we see here, Bitcoin historical top, cycle top to cycle top, we saw about 1,400 days. But that would put the top in anywhere between October 11th and November 26th based off the 2013 bull run or the 2017 bull run. We then have the Bitcoin halving to the Bitcoin cycle top. Again, this is actually pretty close. Within 8 days of each other, this is possibly the one that is the closest together. That puts us at October 19th to somewhere to October 27th. If we came 8 days within this again to one side or the other, 510 days would put us around about October 9th. And if it went a little bit further, the latest out would be somewhere around November the 7th. Okay, so that would give us your Bitcoin halving to Bitcoin cycle top. And this is what a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on. They say, oh, the best way is to buy Bitcoin 500 days before the halving and then sell it 500 days after, essentially that, and then rinse, repeat. And you just have to make those two trades. And historically, that would make common sense if history does repeat. And then we see cycle low to cycle top. And this one has a spread of about 40 days. This one has a spread of about 50 days here. And that's quite a lot of time, between the beginning of October to the end of November. This one here has a very small spread. So a lot of people like going based off this one here. And then, of course, this one here is a spread of about 47 days there. And that could put us anywhere between September the 7th, which has already happened there, and, of course, October the 24th. Now, of course, if the top is already in, then this here would all be broken because we had the top would have been in August. However, it would have been quite close. We're quite close there. Of course, it would be 50, 60 days off. And then the fourth area that we look at is the cycle tops have always come in November, December, and November, which could put us, if we want to stick to this within 500 days thesis, we could still come in the 500-day range. Even 8 days puts us in early November. There, of course, could be a possible top for the Bitcoin cycle. If you like this November, December, November, are we going to get December or are we going to get in November again? But the Bitcoin cycle top has never not been in November or December. And of course, the last option is that the super cycle is happening and the 4-year cycle is broken. I have a little bit of a problem with this because those preaching the super cycle, aka permabulls, just go to your local permabull YouTube channel. And their issue is they cover themselves by saying, well, we're going to get a super cycle because of ETF, etc., and all this other stuff that they will spout out. And it's true that none of the traditional Bitcoin cycle top indicators have yet flashed there, of course. And that's another good, strong argument for the top not being in and that we will still see a top. But that's not a good argument for the super cycle because, again, looking at this data, the top really shouldn't be in until October or November. If we were to take an average of all these dates, we're looking at October or early November as being the possible cycle top. And so that still doesn't give strength to the argument of a super cycle just because those Bitcoin top signals. What if those Bitcoin top signals happen in October and November or December? Then now the case becomes weaker for the super cycle. So we're not meant to get a Bitcoin cycle top signals at this moment. Historically, they shouldn't come for another month, 2 or 3. Now, here's what I have the problem with the super cycle. The gospel of the super cycles is that they then cover themselves by saying, well, we'll have a super cycle and Bitcoin won't drop any less than 50%. I'm sorry, any asset that drops 50% is in a bear market. Sit down, okay? So you can't say you're going to have a super cycle, but Bitcoin's still going to correct by 50%. I think that the 4-year cycle is still intact until it isn't. There is no reason to believe that when the 4-year cycle is broken until it is broken. And we're not really going to know that until early next year, January, February time. If Bitcoin is still powering on, we can officially say, hey, the 4-year cycle is broken. But nobody has a crystal ball. Anybody who is saying that we're in a super cycle is purely just guessing, and they're flipping the coin and they've got a 50% chance of being right. Look, I think that Bitcoin probably doesn't correct more than 50% as well. That doesn't mean we're in a super cycle. That just means the bear market is not as deep for Bitcoin. And I think a lot of that really depends when the top is in. Now, if the top is in at about 123,000, then I would expect us to correct somewhere in that 60 to 70,000 and drop about 50%. I think if we go up a lot higher to 100 or 140 or 150,000, 130,000, I still think the Bitcoin bear market is going to be around about that $70,000 level. Again, puts us around about that 50% level. I think we would come down to the 70s, maybe not the 60s. And of course, remember, Bitcoin very rarely has ever dropped below the previous cycle all-time high, which is 69,000, okay? So Bitcoin coming back to 73,000 would be, at this point, even less than 50%, okay? So that it could be a 40 or 50%. It doesn't mean that at the 4-year cycle that we're in some kind of a super cycle and the 4-year cycle is broken. And I'm not saying that we can't have a super cycle or go into a super cycle here and that it just moves, Bitcoin moves a lot with the stock market. But I want to know your thoughts. Leave your comments on this video. Leave your comments on this X post that I have here. I would like to know your thoughts on when you think the Bitcoin cycle top will be in, or when you feel there will be a 50% correction, aka the Bitcoin cycle top being in, okay? Let me know, and maybe that should be the more question is, when do you think Bitcoin will have its big correction, which is aka the 4-year cycle top, and when are we going to get a drop? And what kind of drop will that be? Look, if we dropped from 109,000 to 74,000 with all the ETF, and that's a decent drop, okay, then what kind of a drop are we going to see when things actually do get a lot more bearish there, okay? So those are some thoughts there that I have, of course. And, I also wanted to show you something that I posted right at the beginning of August there. I said likely both a drop to 108K. And this was, remember, before we shot above to that, and a break above 118K. That's exactly what happened. We went up, we broke above 118K, and then we dropped. Where do we drop to? Bang on 108K. And if we look at the Bitcoin charts there, we'll see exactly what I showed everybody there. Where are we at the beginning of August? There we are, right there. Where did we go up? We went up and we broke above 118. In fact, we exceeded that. Once we'd done that, where did we come down to? 108K. And that's why in the Tribal Trades Discord, they call it following the yellow brick road. And I used to do that every episode. Of course, now a lot of episodes I cover stocks and I don't even get to cover crypto, but we talk about the liquidity charts here and we go follow the yellow brick road, follow the yellow brick road. We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. And of course, this is where we cover the liquidity of where Bitcoin might be going coming up. And we see where all the liquidation heat map is. And you see there's a fair bit above here on the monthly time frame. And of course, we could come lower and grab this down here and come back and have a final flush before we push up. But I'd be very surprised again if there wasn't some kind of a final push to grab the liquidity that's above. Again, the strongest liquidity is down here around this 106, 107,000. And so there is risk. Now, of course, if we're close to the end of the 4-year cycle, it would make sense that there we would come down and take these levels a lot later, and then we'd push up and grab some of these levels that are above. But there is not as much liquidity on the longer time frames. It is to the bottom there. So my expectation is actually, if I'm the market maker, and I'm going to tell you what I do as of the market maker, I would actually push up and I'd have one final push to wipe out all this liquidity there and wait for a whole bunch more longs to FOMO in and fill up this area, make it more stronger and stronger here, and then have one final flush out to the downside there for a good 30, 40, 50% to the downside. You can see there all the liquidity to the upside up to about 120,000 there. If I'm the market maker, I want to go and grab this, and I can use the news. If we get CPI that comes in cooler or mild, that would strengthen for a rate cut. And then, of course, if we get the rate cut, we could get a bit of a rally to the upside, one final push before then coming down, and we grab all of this liquidity. That will be a lot more will be added as people will be going long. Bitcoin's going 150, 200,000, 300,000, and everybody will be FOMOing and long. And then the market makers, if I'm the market maker, I come down and get all of that liquidity that is there to the downside. Again, as we just go through, the highest amount of liquidity is concentrated above. Again, I can only tell you what I would do if I was the market maker, is I would be going and getting that liquidity above first to the upside that we saw before coming back and getting the liquidity that there is low. Now, of course, we could get this jump to the downside first. They could trick us and come down and get that 107 before going up. We could have some flush down before a flush up before, and if that's the case, then that would strengthen the case that the bull run may continue later into the year there. But there's some thoughts. I can only tell you what I would do if I was the market maker. I'd love to hear what you would do if you were the market maker there, of course. And we're going to have a quick look at the Bitcoin charts here. And of course, while we are there on the weekly time frame, of course, we do have that inverse head and shoulders pattern. It is still in play. Whether or not it completely plays out, it's partially played out to this top level of 145. Not sure. There's 132 there, of course. Now, of course, we could get we've got a left shoulder ahead. Are we making a right shoulder? And that may start to come into play. And then if we lose this neckline here around 108,000, then we could really see some move to the downside. However, on the daily time frame, if we have a quick look at the daily time frame here, and of course, what we have here is a inverse head and shoulders pattern here on the daily time frame. If we do see a breakout of that level, we'll just do a quick look there, what that could look like. that does take us back to that 117,000, that key level there. And so this could be a good time to, if we do see this move to the upside and we do get stuck here, that could be a good time to start closing some positions. I'm not saying that we can't have a super cycle, that we won't go into a super cycle. I just think the probability is higher at this point that we will still see a continuation of the 4-year cycle. It will come to an end as usual. And don't be fooled by those super cycle perma bulls that once we do have this 40 or 50% correction, they say, well, that wasn't a bear market. That was just a correction in the super cycle. No, I still do think we're going to get that kind of a bear market drop. I still do think the 4-year cycle is intact until it isn't. That's all we have time for today. So until the next episode, or until I see you in the Discord, there's a link below in the description. You can click the more button, and just under that, you can get on the wait list there for the Tribal Trades Discord.